Every passenger jet is a traveling life support system, carrying inside it the highly pressurized oxygen that keeps us alive. If it ever escapes, a simple flight becomes a living nightmare. United 811.
There was nothing in front of us or to the side of us. The whole side of the plane was gone.
Aloha 243.
Everything was being sucked out of the plane.
British Airways 5390.
I'll never forget, his face was hitting the side screen, but he didn't blink.
Mayday, mayday, mayday!
Declaring an emergency!
Sometimes it takes a terrible accident to expose hidden dangers and change the way airplanes are built.
Unfortunately, we wait until we have enough bodies. Too many of the changes have been, in effect, written in blood.
Mayday, mayday!
This is the assembly plant for the Airbus A320. After the Boeing 737, it's the most popular jet plane ever built. Almost 2,000 of them are flying for airlines around the globe. It's safe and dependable, the airline equivalent of a minivan. The aluminium skin on the top of an A320 is less than 2 millimeters thick, about as thick as a coin. But this slender piece of metal helps keep passengers alive. Because the skies aren't nearly as friendly as they seem.
Most people take aviation absolutely for granted. The difference between being on a commercial airliner at 35,000 feet and being in a space capsule in orbit is really not all that different. They're both life support systems. The reality is, it's a hostile environment. The reality is, it's 50 degrees below zero outside. The reality is that jet stream or that airstream out there would kill you almost immediately.
It's not natural for people to travel through this killer atmosphere. But every day, millions of us fly easily some 3,000 meters higher than the top of Mount Everest.
All our life support that's natural for us is down here at the bottom of this sea of air. And if we swim up too high, however we get there, if we're not protected, we can't live.
But taking oxygen with us up to 11,000 meters is potentially dangerous. The air inside an airplane is pressurized, so passengers can breathe easily. As planes climb, the pressure outside decreases. The tightly packed air in the cabin begins exerting tremendous pressure on the fuselage. On an average jetliner, it means that every square meter of the fuselage must support more than 5,000 kilograms of force. And on almost every flight, the fuselage wins the battle. But only because airplane designers have learned tragic lessons.
We have concentrated in the past on changing things, but unfortunately we wait until we have enough bodies.
In the 1950s, a series of shocking accidents triggered changes that are still seen today.
The comet has blazed new trails, achieving new speeds, setting a new standard.
The passenger jet era began in the 1950s with the introduction of the de Havilland Comet. For the first time, jet engines were being used to push commercial planes higher than ever before.
What Great Britain had at stake with the comet was enormous. They wanted to really declare their place in civil aviation by having the first successful jet transport aircraft.
But less than 2 years after its maiden flight, the glittering jewel of British aviation disintegrated in mid-air.
It would have been horrible. It would have been a horrible situation, but mercifully it would have been quick. What they had found with the bodies that they had recovered is the massive decompression, of course, caused the air inside your lungs to burst your lungs. At the same time, the outrush of air would tear you from your seat, and many of these people would actually smash their heads against the structure.
3 months later, another comet ripped apart in flight. Officials feared that every single comet could be a flying time bomb. The entire fleet is grounded.
The design of the comet was actually a very sound design. There was only one thing that they didn't do, and it's because nobody knew.
Unknown to engineers, there was a deadly flaw in the comet's basic design. To find the jet's fatal weakness, investigators built a massive water tank. They immersed a stripped-down comet. The pressure in the tank was increased and decreased, simulating the strains of flight. The experiment ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. After the equivalent of some 3,000 flights, the comet's Achilles heel revealed itself. Its square windows.
You have a rapid change of direction in the shape, essentially a corner. You have a high stress concentration. It gave rise to a fatigue crack, which then traveled rapidly through the rest of the structure, causing a massive decompression.
The most advanced passenger jet in the world had succumbed to metal fatigue. The fuselage simply could not handle the force of the air inside, pressing out.
The airplane, with all that force behind it, suddenly unzipped itself.
Every plane that's built today is safer because of the disaster that struck the comet. Like other passenger planes, the windows on the A320 are rounded, so that pressure doesn't build up around the corners. Perhaps even more importantly, extra rivets reinforce the skin of today's planes to contain cracks that might start anywhere on the fuselage.
It's designed to go to that first row of rivets and absolutely be stopped. It's a healthy structure. It can never unzip itself.
But 34 years after the comet crash, aircraft manufacturers were faced with another tragic disaster. The extra rivets that were supposed to save lives failed to withstand the relentless power of air pressure on metal.
One of the fellows that I knew at the FAA, he said, you know, the day after this accident, I had to throw away most of what I knew about metallurgy and start over.
At this Airbus factory in Toulouse, France, A320s roll out at about the rate of one every working day. Titanium rivets, lightweight and extremely tough, hold the fuselage together. 3,000 are used to join the separate sections. Another 3,000 can be found on each wing. Without them, the fuselage couldn't contain the pressurized air that's forced inside during flight. But even these rivets aren't foolproof. April the 28th, 1988. Aloha Airlines Flight 243 is traveling from Hilo Airport on the Big Island to Honolulu. With this island hop, Aloha 243 is making its 9th flight of the day, a normal schedule for the planes of Aloha. Protected within the jet, passengers give little thought to the fact that the cabin is filled with pressurized oxygen. It's constantly pushing against the fuselage, trying to escape into the surrounding atmosphere. In the cabin, the pressure is kept at a constant level, so passengers feel like they've never left the ground. But as a plane rises to its cruising altitude, the air pressure outside the cabin is dangerously low. The air moving through the cabin creates constant pressure on the jet's fuselage, keeping it inflated like a balloon. On this day in April 1988, passengers are about to learn what happens when that air suddenly escapes.
I saw a brilliant flash of light and boom.
Everything was being sucked out of the plane.